Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ask, Learn, Grow, the show where the Reef team answer questions and share updates and insights from the digital marketing industry. I'm joined today with SEO Manager Piotr, and we're going to be talking about SEO myths, of which there's quite a few. Piotr, what are sort of the common SEO myths that you are coming across today? Let's get this going.
No worries. I'll kind of dive into a few myths during our call today. There's quite a lot in the SEO space, from SEO itself to content to backlinks, which we'll be covering in this conversation. But definitely the biggest one that I've been seeing, and I'm pretty sure anyone in the SEO space has been hearing about since 2014, is essentially that, SEO is dead. Primarily because SEO is just getting harder and harder for a lot of people.
Hear that one every year.
Yeah, compared to what it was a long time ago, people, just being able to buy links, and that was pretty much it. Whoever had the biggest budget to buy links kind of ruled the SERPs. Now, definitely Google and, just users have changed their behavior in terms of, requesting better information, Google tightening their belt in terms of figuring out, what's the best content to kind of serve to users, the user intent, etc. So I definitely feel that that myth has been around for a long time. And whenever there's a new change, especially when it comes to, anything from a minor algorithm update to something really, really broad, like, back in the days where Penguin was rolling out and other algorithms are affecting other thin content or backlinks or things of that nature, it kind of throws out the ecosystem to a degree, and it kind of prunes out the more black hat people, and it kind of keeps, people who are doing a good job, much more, thriving from that perspective. So that's why I kind of feel that common myths around is because people do find it hard. It's definitely not easy, but if you do everything by the book, you will definitely get wins in the run in terms of in the SERPs. So that's the way I feel about it.
And you mentioned about content as well.
Yep.
So what myths have you heard about content? Because there's there's been and still is quite a lot of talk, and I guess rightly so, about content in the last couple of years.
Yep, certainly. So there's been a very large amount of misinformation in the SEO space overall, but one of the bigger ones is, not necessarily needing to just have anything else to rank but content. And I feel that that's a bit of a misconception, because a lot of people are like, oh, my website ranks really, really well. I don't do any links. I don't do any technical SEO. I just have content. And that only works in like very small micro niches. And what I feel a lot of people tend to do is they kind of just pick up a headline or one person's experience and they kind of run with it. And that's how a lot of these kind of stereotypes happen and these myths start to come about. And I just feel that, definitely just testing on your own is one good way to kind of dispel some of these myths. But another one is if you try and compete in more competitive niches, for example, life insurance or anything that's, super competitive like e-commerce, content alone won't get you rankings. And I feel that's just one thing that people need to be very considerate of. Content is important, but it's not the entire picture when it comes to SEO. It's just one role in a larger ecosystem.
One of the pillars, isn't it, really?
Yes.
Because we talk quite a bit about the three pillars of SEO, content being one, technical being the other, and then digital PR and off-site brand building links, all that kind of stuff being the third. Cool. Okay, so just on the off-site stuff, what kind of myths are you hearing, if any, about backlinks?
Sure. There's so many to kind of pick from, but one of the bigger ones I kind of see is that, all kind of backlinks are the same, that people are like, oh, it doesn't really matter if I buy links because my website's still ranking, or, links from a certain source could be the same as from another. And I feel that backlinks have always had that kind of mystery behind it, because there's so many tests going on. There's people saying that, black hat SEO still works in 2020, for example, because you see people buying links, for example. And I just feel that just putting like a broad statement surrounding links isn't good, because definitely there are different types of quality of links. And I feel that kind of assuming that all links are the same is a really bad approach, because definitely they are not. And if you don't do the right job behind it, you can easily penalize your website. And even if you do get links from like, purchasing them, for example, from like a negative perspective, you're only going to get a quick win for a short period of time. Eventually Google's going to tweak the algorithm and strike your website down. So definitely all the links are not equal, and I would suggest to try and do, as you've mentioned, some good PR and some creative, link building strategies to get organic links and to get those high quality links secured to your website.
A little side topic, but it kind of ties into myths and links as well. What do you think about the sort of recent chatter around Wikipedia pages? Because Google kind of stated that this link does absolutely nothing for your website.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm happy to jump in on that one. Primarily, I feel that with Google doing very broad statements as that, I kind of understand what they're trying to do, because there's new people coming into the SEO space, every day, and there's a lot of veterans in the space like myself and other people who've been years and years in this area. And I'm just kind of concerned with certain broad statements, such as, people indicating, especially Google indicating that, there's zero link value. And I feel that when people just read a headline or just read a little bit of an article, that's where a myth is easily kind of created, because people are going to be like, SEO doesn't, Wikipedia pages don't do much for SEO. Well, it turns out, yes, from a purely backlink perspective, they don't do anything for SEO, because since 2007, Google's made sure that, any links coming from a Wikipedia page aren't followed. So there's no actual link value, but there is value to the website from a broader perspective. And by elaborating on that, perfect example is like a knowledge graph. If you were to type in, Nike, and then, branded knowledge graph that appears, like that first entire paragraph is sourced from Wikipedia. So there is value from that kind of perspective, where it's not necessarily from a link perspective, but there's value from a branded perspective and a rich snippet perspective, which isn't necessarily covered. And I feel that there has to be that, distinction made, that Google should come out and say Wikipedia pages don't do anything for your website from a backlink perspective, but they should be more clear and say that there are some benefits of your business, if applicable, to actually have a Wikipedia page. Because a perfect example is that you have a higher chance of enhancing your branded snippet or knowledge graph, I should say, in search results. And if you look up Apple, Nike, Tesla, any of these big companies, a lot of that information is actually being pulled from none other than Wikipedia. So it's quite interesting from that perspective. So I'll just be kind of cautious. This is for a lot of those newcomers to the SEO space. Treat what Google says with a little bit of grain of salt, so to speak, and then try and do your own research behind it, because these broad statements easily perpetuate myths in the long term. Well, I wouldn't be surprised in the future if people are going to start saying, Wikipedia doesn't do anything for SEO. Well, in fact, that's actually slightly, wrong from that perspective.
Yeah, I always find Google's sort of sweeping blanket statements deliberately vague and open.
I think the purpose is they just don't want to direct newcomers to focusing too much resources time into something that may not really benefit them in the long term. Because I understand Wikipedia is hard to get a link from that perspective, as in like build your own page, because there is strict criteria and all these other things involved. So I understand why Google's doing it, but it's just that I think they're gonna try and keep people on the right path, especially for newcomers. But for like more seasoned SEO experts, are definitely kind of consider that statement and just think about it and ponder. And I think there's definitely a bit of inaccuracies when it comes to certain these broad statements. So definitely I kind of wish that Google would be a bit more clearer, but once again, I do understand why they're doing it. They kind of want to keep people on that one path instead of just kind of doing too many things at once, getting frustrated, and they realize that they sunk months and months of time into a strategy that doesn't yield any benefits for them. So that makes sense from that perspective.
Cool. Thanks, Piotr. Any other myths to wrap up before we close this call off?
Certainly. This video could easily last an hour on all these myths, but I'll quickly just wrap up one more, which is a classic one, which is, all Google algorithms are, basically sending out penalty notices to websites. And I think that's quite misleading, because people realize that during most algorithm updates, the site either stops ranking completely, or, they lose a lot of rankings for what they were ranking for previously. And I think one thing that a lot of people don't really understand is that these algorithm updates are just ranking recalibrations, essentially. Yes, there were some algorithms in the past that were directly related to, combating spam or combating, black hat link tactics.
Penguin,
but like Penguin, like you've mentioned. But now, more recently, in the last few years, it's just primarily refining the algorithm process. So the way an algorithm actually works now is a part of that algorithm snippet is launched live in search results. Google actually monitors how users interact with these new SERPs information. So by SERP information, it could be something as just changing the structure around of how certain pages rank. Maybe a page that was ranking 4th is now ranking 1st, and vice versa, and seeing how users interact with it. Then they also have a team of their own individual quality checkers, and they go through and they start to look at the results too, and they start to compare whether it's good, whether it's actually creating a better user experience, whether the websites that are ranking are fine, and for that purpose or for that query. And then once all of this is kind of sorted, then they roll out an algorithm update. Yes, recently Google has kind of botched through algorithm updates from time to time. It does happen. There are a few bugs here and there. Nothing's perfect, but when you kind of think about it, the best way to look at it from a more broad perspective is these algorithm updates don't necessarily penalize websites. They just try to recalibrate results to get the best search results possible for users. Because at the end of the day, Google's main, ethos in a way is to provide the best user experience and to provide the best and most relevant information. And if your website doesn't provide the best or most relevant information for a query, your website will basically be moved out of the way for another website to take in that same spot. So this is why it's also important to make sure that your content is up to date, your website is basically as well optimized as it possibly can be, and just to kind of ensure that your website is providing the best user experience for whatever demographic that you're targeting, and that your information is clear, concise, and really useful. And that's kind of my 2 cents really about that. So you shouldn't really worry about algorithms as much, because if you do a good job, you will most likely more than not benefit, rather than have your rankings being lost over time. So definitely, just to clear that one up, Google does not penalize websites with every algorithm update that rolls out.
Cool. Thanks very much for sharing that information, Piotr. So just to a very quick recap, SEO isn't dead. It gets strong results when done the right way. You need more than just content in most cases to rank and gain visibility. There are 3 pillars to any solid SEO strategy: technical, content, and digital PR. All backlinks are not the same. Wikipedia pages have benefits other than the link if you happen to have one or create one, and Google algorithms do not roll out penalties with every update, and you may be positively affected versus negatively affected with the Google update as well. Cool. That wraps up today's call. So thanks everyone for watching. If you've got any questions about this or any digital marketing related topic, do send them in, or if you'd like to see the team answer a burning question or cover a particular topic, send those in too, and we'll see what we can do. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be notified of when the next video is available. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for watching.